Well, thank you so much. And first of all, just congratulations again to everyone who has made these last 5 years possible, to Karina and John and their incredible team members and board members and financial supporters and the incredible teachers and some of you now alumni and others. I'm forgetting the education department and leaders. I mean, so many people who've come together to actually make this happen. So I'm honored to have the chance to be with you on this occasion of your 5th year, to step back and celebrate and also think about what the future might hold. I would never have guessed that I would, first of all, still be going at this 30 years later, and secondly, that my work would have brought me here to Romania. This was the original thesis, in which I proposed this idea, and a few things brought me to this, but I was just convinced that our generation, that at the time was known as the me generation, we supposedly only cared about ourselves. I was convinced that was wrong, and that we were just searching for a way to do something that would make a bigger difference. I was concerned about the inequities in our country and convinced that if all kids could have the chance to attain an excellent education, we would address those inequities. And that's what led me to this idea. It was a long, long road from that idea to ensuring that, in fact, Teach for America became the thriving movement that it is today, with probably 60,000 people who've committed themselves to this, who have taught for 2 years and never left the work and have assumed leadership roles at every level of the education system and of policy and across sectors, who are collectively affecting meaningful change. And I say that because I think about where you all are in your 5th year. If people saw where we were in our 5th year, they never would have imagined the impact that ultimately came out of Teach for America. And now, as you heard, there are 48 organizations, including Teach for Romania, in every part of the world, and many more in the pipeline. But for each of those organizations, it's a long road, navigating all the challenges of finding the funding and building the governmental support and designing the program that recruits not just anyone, but the people who are really ready for this, who have what it takes to succeed with their students, to learn the right lessons, to finish their 2 years more committed to the change that needs to happen rather than more disillusioned. So I say all that just because I know if you're in this work from at any level, whether you're on the team or in the classroom or on the board or one of the financial supporters, how messy this is and how challenging it can be. But what I've seen from all of these journeys, from my initial journey at Teach for America and now getting to live vicariously through many others in 48 countries around the world, I see that as messy as it is, with perseverance, there's something truly powerful, and I'll say a bit about this approach that we've kind of collectively landed on. What brings us all together is this purpose: to develop collective leadership to ensure all children fulfill their potential. Clearly what brought all of you to Teach for Romania and what brings all of these people all around the world to this approach is a commitment to address the fact that the circumstances of kids' birth predict their educational outcomes and their life outcomes. But what we know is that is a very complex challenge. It doesn't start in classrooms. It starts way before kids even get to classrooms, just because whole segments of kids face many extra challenges that other kids don't face, and then they show up at schools that were really not set up to meet their extra needs, and there's a whole kind of set of mindsets about the potential for kids to excel that kind of fuels the whole thing. And as you confront the complexity of the challenge, you kind of come to realize that the only path to addressing it in a meaningful and sustainable way is to come at it in its full complexity. Meaning we need change within classrooms, we need change at every level of the education system, we need policy change, we need things like improving the nutrition system and the health system and the social services system. We need lots of change. And that's what leads us to this purpose, is to ask the question, where is the leadership going to come from to affect the many changes that we need to see? And so what each of these organizations are working to do, as you well know, is to draw many more of the most promising leaders in their countries to channel their energy into this arena of working with the most vulnerable kids. Initially through committing 2 years to teach, because we know that for the kids growing up today, they need as many as possible of the most committed and talented teachers helping them overcome the challenges they face, access the opportunities they need to access. And we can be one more source, alongside many others, of the kind of teachers our students need. And at the same time, what we've seen through our experience is that those 2 years become absolutely foundational for the kind of leadership we need. There's something about teaching successfully in the highest need communities that is totally transformative on so many levels. And I think you've seen it here in Romania, where it seems almost all the Teach for Romania participants are still in and around the work. Across the network, 75% of the people who come in unsuspectingly committing, quote, just 2 years, never leave education, and many others are still working in and around low-income communities, working in policy, working in public health, doing other things to tackle the issue in their full complexity. And as you get closer and closer to this approach, you realize it's not only about the leadership of the people you're recruiting and developing, but it's about their students' leadership, the leadership of the other teachers in the schools, of the students' parents, of others in communities. So it's about our recruiting and selecting and training and supporting people in such a way that they in turn catalyze and support ultimately the kind of collective leadership we need to affect the many systemic changes necessary to create a different world where all kids do have the chance to attain an excellent education, and the kind of education that will enable them to, as we've been hearing about all day, shape a better future, for themselves and for all of us. As I've had the chance to see this approach play itself out in many different countries and cultures and contexts around the world, I've seen a couple of things that fuel my sense of optimism about the work you're doing here in Romania and about our collective pursuit around the world. The first of them is just to see those leadership effects, play themselves out in almost inevitably, it seems, irrespective of the context, whether we're in, Nigeria or Pakistan or Bulgaria or the next place. I think what we've seen too is that over time, and it's probably hard to see this just 5 years in, but over time that makes a real difference in communities and countries at a systemic level. I think about the partners that launched first, like after Teach for America and Teach First launched in the UK, Enseña Chile and Enseña Peru launched in Latin America, Teach for India, launched. And I think about what's happening in the communities where they started placing folks 10 years ago. You can see incredible effects. I was just earlier this year in India, where the team that was leading the effort in Pune, India, which was one of the first 2 placement sites, walked me through where they are in their work. And, they showed me a slide deck which basically laid out a vision for a reimagined education for all of Pune's children. And they talked through what they'd done in the last 8 years and what the plan is for the next 10. And in the last 8 years, they've, and they've placed about, probably 500 people in Pune, India. 200 are still teaching, another 300 are alumni of the program, but still in and around the work. They've convinced the government to give them 10 school buildings and have launched Reimagine Schools in those buildings. They've launched an effort that each year now retrains and develops 1,500 government teachers a year. They've launched something that recruits and develops cohorts each year of new school principals. They've launched a collective action organization that brings the business community and the governmental folks together to develop a strategic plan to improve the system. And now they're launching, early education and school to career supports attached to these schools and a plan to have 100 reimagined schools in the next decade. So I give just that one example to share how the leadership effects of this approach play themselves out to ultimately generate the kind of systemic change, the community level progress that we ultimately want to see and need to see. The second thing we've seen over time is, so I think when we started, and certainly this was the notion at the core of Teach for Romania's work, we started out of a recognition that local leadership capacity is absolutely crucial, that if we want to affect transformative change in education, it's going to take deeply locally rooted leaders who deeply understand the local context and culture and have trusting relationships in the local communities and country. I think what we've seen over time in the last 10 years has been how much more quickly local leaders move when they're exposed to what's working and what's possible in other places. So I think about the alumni of Teach for India in Pune who were inspired so much by what they were seeing alumni across the network doing. And they'd be the first to say they probably never even would have realized that it was possible to build a citywide movement to change things for kids if they hadn't learned from the Teach for America alumni who were doing the same thing in New Orleans through a Teach for All network learning visit. So we just repeatedly see how similar the roots of the issues that we're addressing are and how much more shareable the solutions are in education than I think we've previously realized in education. In health and the environment, we all know our fates are interconnected, the solutions are shareable. But in education, we haven't acted on that same insight, which is equally true. So I think we're at the very early stages of something that has so much potential. Can we ultimately realize a world where not just a few, but many of Romania's most promising future leaders and of the most promising future leaders in countries all over the world are channeling their energy into the arena of working with our most disadvantaged kids and are not only deeply rooted in their own countries to address the challenges there, but connected to each other so that they're learning from each other across borders. A couple or 3 years ago, we stepped back as a global community to ask ourselves what we were working to accomplish over the next 25 years. We've come to realize that this work of ours is such a long game. And so we asked ourselves, by 25 years from now, in our work together across the network, what do we want to achieve? And this vision is what resulted from that process. And it will sound very lofty, perhaps, but there were such important choices that have been so orienting for our work. By 2040, we'll see whole communities in every part of the world showing us what's possible, essentially, showing us that all children can have the education, support, and opportunity to shape a better future for themselves, navigate a changing economy, and for all of us, solve our increasingly complex societal problems, so that those communities in turn inspire and inform a worldwide movement to do this everywhere. I think as we all look at the state of our world and of our societies, and someone said earlier, we can predict what our society will be by looking at today's schools. It's so true, and we have such a chance to change that, and it all will start by ensuring that the kids in our classrooms are attaining the kind of education that enable them to shape a better future, for themselves and for all of us. I have no doubt, based on everything I've seen in the last 5 years here in Romania, based on the discussions we had before this event and everything we've heard here, that some of these communities will be right here in Romania. And I'm so excited for our global network to learn from you all as you pioneer the community level solutions and the community level progress that ensure that ultimately we'll all be learning from Romania. So good luck in your journey, and I'll look forward to continuing to learn with you and alongside you. Thank you.